Hi Rockets, thank you for having me here today. My name is Cappy and I graduated in class of 2011. It is an honor to be selected for the Who Will Tell the Story recognition established by the Sisters of Mercy. If asked 13 years ago if I'd be here sharing my story with an entire school, I wouldn't have believed you. I was an average student that participated in a few sports and grades were always very important, but I wasn't necessarily the best at anything. At Assumption, I really enjoyed how compassionate the teachers truly were and the school's commitment to service. And I thought it was really cool that through the ACTS program, we get to take time out of school to go out in the world and demonstrate service to others. And I chose working with children because I enjoy their contagious spirit and joy and lightness. After Assumption, I wasn't totally sure what life was to bring. I didn't have real clarity on my relationships, college, where I was going to study, if I was going to join a sorority, what profession. For a while, I felt kind of lost in the motion. I knew I wanted to be something more, and I knew I wanted to explore the world, and I applied for different jobs. I ended up backpacking through Europe, then that took me to living in Philadelphia, then New York, but then I felt lost again. Then COVID happened. So I started working remote and sought advice and wisdom from a spiritual leader that I know. And I found one of the greatest life lessons, that failures aren't necessarily what you perceive them to be, but the universe trying to nudge you or redirect you to your purpose. Think of failures as a redirection to your calling. I could finally see clarity through my struggles and the rut I was in and the wonderful opportunity that COVID brought. I took this time to get back in touch with nature and animals and my inner creativity through the form of drawing and painting, something that I've always done to find my inner peace, and spent a lot of time alone. In a way, it was freeing and liberating to find who I was and what I wanted to be. I started creating a vision board to help manifest what I want in this next chapter of life. I prayed a lot. I listened to spiritual audible books, even books by the greats. The famous meeting between Archbishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And it made me realize that spirituality and our connection to each other as humans and the life force or the divine or the universe is a lifelong journey that never ends. And then one night I made a commitment to dedicate the rest of my life to service. I wanted something to live for and find meaning in and to work towards every day. And it seemed like the only plausible choice. Then things started happening. I got involved in an anti-human trafficking group and came in contact during this time with a disaster recovery group of just wonderful people that dedicated their life to God's work. Then the war in Ukraine happened. It was such a particular situation where men are more or less the ones fighting and women and children are left vulnerable, innocents are dying, children are harmed and they should never be harmed. I remember I was sitting in Kentucky in my car and I was just crying. I wanted to help the Ukrainians. I was devastated. Then a few days later, that turned into I wanted to go to Ukraine. Didn't know how, but I knew I would make it work. I started contacting different groups, humanitarian groups, church groups, and that group I contacted before. I placed a call to that group and the guy goes, "That'd be great. When do you want to come?" I told work, I told my parents, and I knew I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell my mom right away. So as far as she knew, I was in Poland. But my dad, I wanted him to know in case anything bad happened. So I started preparing, then the unknown. We went across the border together as one group, as one team. I felt safe, I felt secure. I felt like I found a support system. Once we got across the border, that support system continued. It was so inspiring to see people from all over, not just this organization, but from all different countries, all walks of life, here for good. The work that my organization was involved in, we were focused on orphanages. We had a contract with the government to evacuate them, bring them aid, take them on field trips. Then the phasing out happened, which was unexpected but also expected because the mission of this organization was always to force multiply, to empower others and the locals to be able to do their work while they're gone and to multiply out. But in my gut, I knew that I could still do more here because there was still people suffering, still people in need, and I still knew people that were doing great things, so maybe I could support them. So this led me to doing all sorts of random things In any way I could lend a hand, I would, whether that was helping different Ukrainian or American NGOs, driving people, making granola, making pizza for refugees, and even helping with overhead tasks. Even on Independence Day, I drugged my friends to pass out candy in the Carpathian Mountains to different families. But I knew surely there was more. But what's more? What's my focus? Children. What has always helped me? Painting, being in the creative flow. Since I was a kid and throughout my whole life, what if I could bring art to these kids that have been through so much? I ended up lining up an art workshop at a shelter that I visited before, bought some supplies, got some volunteers, and had it. And later, I had an interview with a journalist friend in a hospital, and we asked them if they would benefit from art workshops. They said, yeah. So I started getting more volunteers and asking around. I went to an art gallery, and a lady told me about a mom and daughter that were having workshops in the area and throughout the Lviv Oblast. I met them over lunch, and I was just in awe of them and how many workshops they had done, like dozens. And I asked them what made them keep going. And they told me a story about a little boy that was just thanking them for one of the best days of his life, and especially since the war. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to empower people like them. And I knew that the best way through that was probably through making a nonprofit. So I ended up organizing an art workshop with them at the hospital, where we had an open house sort of art workshop. And I even found students at the local university to play music. And the best part was to see how much fun all the kids had. One of the next ones was at a special needs orphanage in the Carpathian Mountains. This one was extra special because an organization that is in charge of seeing orphanages in this area said that they don't get much of a chance to visit them or bring them supplies because they're so far away. I knew that I wanted to make this day extra special for them, and I wanted to go there and bring a bunch of volunteers and musicians again. So we had 2 carloads that drove out to the Carpathian Mountains, and it was one of the best days for all of us. Another art workshop was done after an elderly man and I did a medical aid drop at a hospital in Kharkiv, and then we took the longer way back through Dnipro so that we could conduct an art workshop there at a rehabilitation center for families of military personnel. That night that we went to sleep before the art workshop, there were bombings in the morning, and the deep sleeper that I am, I didn't hear them, and they were only a few miles away. Thankfully, we were still able to conduct that art workshop without any more bombings during or after, but it reminds you of the state of fear and panic that these children and families are constantly living in and going through every day. Then we did many more art workshops. Then I finally had that experience like the mom and daughter had. We just got done conducting an art workshop at a private orphanage that is ran by priests. And as we were cleaning up, the children were getting ready for dinner and getting served their food, and they all started praying. And one young girl stood up leading the prayer in Ukrainian. And I didn't know what she was saying, but it was clear that it was impactful because I saw the mother and daughter crying. And when the prayer was over, I asked them what was she saying. They said she was thanking God for bringing us to them and how much fun she had today. As I was nearing my 7 months in Ukraine, I knew that I would have to make a difficult decision to go home, but I knew that I could still make a difference at home. I knew I wanted to continue to support Ukrainian children in Ukraine remotely. So I started collecting donated artworks from some of the children with art workshops we had and adult artists to keep the mission going. I spent the Christmas holiday in the month of January starting to prepare and organize fundraisers for back in the US. I knew that I wanted to have an art show in conjunction with the online auction. Through word of mouth, my uncle put a word into Assumption, and one of the community members and fellow alum started playing an active role in supporting me in my mission. Then through my grandfather, on the other side of the family, I was able to make a connection to University of Tulsa for a second art show. It goes to show the power of positive intention in our community.
Artwork made by displaced Ukrainian children is on display in downtown Tulsa right now.
It's part of an effort to do something good for those children who have lost everything in the war.
Inside the Oklahoma Center for the Humanities at Archer in Boston, colorful paintings from children in Ukraine fill the walls. Some of the artwork was completed by children as young as 4.
It's so vivid, it's so bright, and it speaks more to hope than tragedy. It would be easy to imagine some really dark and terrible paintings, but we see happy faces. We see, surprisingly to me, a number of American flags hanging on the walls.
And later, I started lining up art workshops where I live now in Portland. I've already hosted several art workshops in Portland and lined up several more with community organizations. When reflecting upon my life and my experience in Ukraine, it taught me the importance of intention and visualizing what you want from life and the person you want to be. You can do anything you put your mind to. One person truly can do anything, but true magic happens when you inspire others too. And there's a name for it. It's called force multiplication. I saw it in Ukraine, and I brought it back here with me to the States. There's a power in our community and finding our tribes. We can be so much and do so much together. Don't be scared, don't overthink it. I'm guilty of that. Be your best, focus on your spiritual growth, and trust the universe will guide you. So what's mercy to you? To me, at the heart of it is compassion and forgiveness. It's being kind without expecting. It's having love for all beings. It's finding teachings in even your enemies and failures. I challenge you to go inward and to really spend time to understand your truth and what part you want to play in this world. Create that vision board and revisit it every so often and try to answer these questions for yourself. What do you feel like is your life's blueprint at this very moment? What is a life of meaning to you? What would you tell your younger self or even future self if you could talk to them? How do you want to create in this world if this world is your canvas? How do you want to change this world? Thank you, Assumption, for having me here today and allowing me to recount my experience. God bless.